Okay, so go ahead and metaphorically put your headphones on, crank that volume all the way up because we're about to feel the groove. Welcome to the explainer for Off the Wall, the blueprint of a king. We are diving straight into a literal monument of music history today, Michael Jackson's 1979 sonic metamorphosis. We aren't just looking at an album today, we're exploring a blueprint. Now, to really get what makes this blueprint so special, we gotta set the stakes. Picture the world in 1979. How did everyone see Michael Jackson? He was still the adorable, prodigiously talented frontman of the Jackson 5, right? The kid with the oversized afro belting out "I'll Be There." But by the end of the 70s, that Motown machine had totally stalled out for him, and he was facing this notoriously treacherous phase, adulthood. I mean, how does a child star actually survive that transition? Honestly, most just fade into obscurity, kind of trapped by the nostalgia of their early years. But Michael, yeah, he didn't just want to survive it. He wanted to completely obliterate his past image. He essentially shed this boy band chrysalis to engineer a leaner, meaner foundation for his future. And look, while a later album like Thriller obviously became the biggest of all time, you could definitely argue that Off the Wall is actually the superior craft. It's this incredibly cohesive disco-funk symphony that serves as the true musical foundation, the literal blueprint for the absolute pop behemoth he was about to become. Section 1, the architects and foundation, laying the groundwork. Because every great blueprint needs a masterful team to actually build it. And for Michael, that journey kicked off with a massive creative lightning bolt in 1978 on the set of the film adaptation of The Wiz, when he met the legendary producer and jazz heavyweight Quincy Jones. Quincy instantly saw Michael's raw, untapped energy. But he had one really strict caveat before agreeing to produce him. Michael had to fire his father, Joe Jackson, as his manager. This literally couldn't be a family affair anymore. Once that was settled, Quincy assembled this absolute all-star onslaught of musical precision. We're talking Greg Fillinganes laying down the essential melodic foundation on keys, Louis Johnson bringing that slapping rubber band funk bass, John J.R. Robinson delivering an immaculate, locked-in drum groove, and Rod Temperton stepping in as the primary songwriter and arranger. Quincy basically built this professional block party. He forced Michael to study classical phrasing and pushed his vocals from that sharp, boy band tenor into this totally new, breathy, soulful falsetto. Section 2, the engine room, track breakdown. Now we're going to see this blueprint in action, heading into the engine room for a track-by-track breakdown. This is truly a masterclass in both production and vocal delivery. We absolutely have to start with the opener, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. I mean, right from the very first second, you're in for something entirely different. It kicks off with this incredibly intimate whispered intro. I was wondering. And it genuinely feels like Michael is leaning right into your ear at some crowded club, pulling you straight out onto the dance floor. And get this, a wildly surprising fact about this track, which was actually Michael's first solo composition for the album. To get the exact percussive tap he heard in his head, Michael literally played a cardboard box in the studio. What's really fascinating here, though, is the vocal technique. Quincy Jones utilized this brilliant method of stacking Michael's harmonies over one another, layered perfectly on top of that syncopated percussive slap. They essentially created a choir of Michaels. It's just wall-to-wall falsetto, a sound so remarkably light, yet so forcefully rhythmic, that it honestly changed the entire trajectory of dance music. But hey, the album isn't just a one-trick pony. On one hand, you've got the frantic, unhinged energy of working day and night. This is the rock precursor track, right? It's full of this aggressive, improvised fury where his gospel roots just bleed right through the heavy funk groove. But then you contrast that with Rock With You. This is the seduction, a silky, perfect disco ball slow jam. If you listen closely to the drums there, the reverb makes it sound like it's being played in a massive, empty hall. It's just effortless, celestial cool. And it completely redefined his image, taking him from a teen idol straight to a mature sex symbol. And the rest of the cuts? They prove this wasn't just a simple dance record. It was a highly sophisticated, genre-bending statement. You've got Get on the Floor, which is basically a sliding bass clinic by Louis Johnson. Then there's the title track, Off the Wall, which serves as this ultimate 9-to-5 liberation anthem. Then we get I Can't Help It, this wonderfully unexpected, dreamy, jazz-infused ambient gift from Stevie Wonder. And finally, Burn This Disco Out. Michael and Quincy knew disco culture was on the verge of a total crash, but they realized that if they fused funk and soul to that disco beat, it would outlive the burnout. And you know what? They hit the nail right on the head. Section 3, sounds, sobs, and style. Let's examine the meticulous sonic engineering, the devastating emotion, and the slick aesthetic polish that tied this whole era together. Now, for all the audiophiles tuning in, the sonic engineering on this record is a literal masterclass. Sound engineer Bruce Swedian used a technique called acoustic isolation. He literally built a physical tent over the drum kit during recording. Why go to that trouble? To capture the pure, incredibly dry punch of the snare. Swedian also completely refused to harshly use limiters during the mastering process. He wanted the initial hit of the kick drum, the transients, to really breathe, all while capturing these massive bass frequencies that would literally shake a room. And honestly, that is exactly why this record still sounds incredibly fresh and punchy even today. And we absolutely can't ignore the visual aesthetic shift here. The album cover is, well, it's iconic. A tuxedo, white socks popping against black shoes, captured in mid-motion by photographer Steve Harvey. Michael was visually completely rejecting those colorful, flamboyant disco suits of the 70s. This formal yet playful, sophisticated yet streetwise look, it paved the exact way for the slick, monochromatic aesthetic that would totally dominate the 1980s. You know, it is genuinely staggering to realize that Michael was only 21 years old when he recorded this album. 21! And that extreme youth, combined with his highly unique, isolated life experience, culminated in the album's Achilles heel, but in the best way possible. See, the album features one truly tear-jerking ballad, She's Out of My Life. During recording, Quincy Jones actually cleared the studio and told a 21-year-old Michael to just think about the absolute saddest moment of his life. And when you listen to that final line, and now she's out of my life, you can literally hear Michael's voice crack. You hear a very real, audible sob. In this massive sea of mathematically perfect, quantized rhythms, they chose to leave that raw, human imperfection right there in the final mix. That singular, devastatingly vulnerable moment gave the entire album its soul. Section 4, the snub and the legacy. Finally, let's explore the immediate commercial impact and the ultimate, completely surprising catalyst that this masterpiece ended up creating. Upon its release, Off the Wall was an immediate, unstoppable commercial juggernaut. We are talking over 20 million copies sold worldwide. It spent weeks just parked at #1 on the Billboard R&B chart. It produced 4 top 10 hits in the US, which, by the way, was a completely unprecedented feat for Mill's solo artist at the time. To put it simply, he had achieved absolutely everything he set out to do. But that rapid ascent hit a massive brick wall in 1980. Despite the completely groundbreaking success of 1979, the 1980 Grammys completely ignored Off the Wall for the biggest prize, Album of the Year. Instead, that award went to Christopher Cross. Michael and Quincy were understandably absolutely furious. Michael actually broke down and made this intense, furious vow, stating, "I won't be ignored. Next album, we won't leave a single track for the radio to ignore." That anger from the snub, it directly fueled the intense paranoia and the obsessive, relentless perfectionism that created his next monumental project. The chip on his shoulder from this exact snub is literally what created Thriller. Which leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to ponder. If Off the Wall had actually won Album of the Year, we might have gotten a complacent artist. Instead, we got a man possessed. So I leave you with this. If this unbroken, joyful blueprint hadn't faced that ultimate rejection, would that perfect storm have ever gathered? Without the snub of Off the Wall, would we have ever gotten the king of pop?